All right, we're going live. I'm live. It's the Nazarite, bringing you Hebrew lore from days of yore. In this week's Torah portion, Kedoshim, which means sacred or sanctified or separated. It's a real mix of commandments having to do with between one person and another, between a person and God, things having to do which are things that are universal, like respecting and fearing to a degree your mother and father, right, showing them respect, and all the way down to things having to do with slavery and things that pertain to the tribes and not like universal laws. There are many many different rules. It's one of the most commandment-filled Torah portions. It's not the largest one, but it's one of the biggest ones as far as commandments are concerned. There's a lot of them in this Torah portion. Out of the 613, there are a lot of them in this one, percentage-wise. So what does it mean to be sacred? What does it mean to be holy? Seeing as this is a channel about the Nazarite vow, and the Nazarite is called holy unto the Lord all the days of his separation, I've sort of dabbled in this topic quite a bit, and I may put a card over there, just one or two of them throughout the video, or if you want, you can go to the channel and check that out. I speak of what it means to be sacred and separated, and what I feel that it means to me. Well, the different the responsibilities that it carries as far as I'm concerned, things of that nature. So in this week's Torah portion, God tells the people of Israel to be sacred. Why? It says, "Be sacred, for I am sacred, the Lord your God." Something to that effect. And the Most High asks us to separate ourselves on the basis of Him, right, separating us. God chose the people of Israel. I mean, first it was mankind, but because of different things for now, until the knowledge of God is everywhere, like water on the sea, right now it's the children of Israel who had this initial covenant with the Most High. And God says, "I chose you for a covenant, and I separated you from the rest of the people of the rest of the nations, and you in turn should also conduct yourselves in the same way and separate yourselves in some ways," which again is something the Nazarite does, and that's why he's called sacred, because sacred means separated. So the Nazarite sets himself apart in a few ways. The children of Israel at large are commanded to separate themselves in a few ways. And this Torah portion, and I'll just get into a few things now, this Torah portion is basically about that. How do we separate ourselves? So this Torah portion deals with how we separate ourselves from the highest or seemingly misunderstood or not understood type of things, like esoteric things, and down to how we separate ourselves with sexual conduct and relations, which is in this Torah portion as well. Parashat Kedoshim, sacred, sanctified, separated, that's the name of this Torah portion. And I feel that throughout the generations, the idea of what it means to be holy sort of opened up. No, it's not through the generations. In every generation, you will have people or nations or ways of life even who take what it means to be holy, and they take it only in a certain way, only in their way. They separate themselves in such a way. And the people of Israel do just that. You can say it causes separation. You can say that it causes segregation. This is all true. Throughout the time that we were in exile, the people of Israel, it's our unique sanctity. And I don't mean that in a proud or egocentric way. I mean, or egotistical way. I mean, literally, where, for instance, in Europe, in the Black Plague, there's the idea. I haven't actually found a source. I didn't look, is what I mean to say, for this. But I think that the reason why the Jewish people in Europe had less of the Black Plague, if what I read is correct, is that because they had the practice and habit ritually of sanctifying their hands after they go to the bathroom, sanctifying their hands before they sit down and break bread. These are still things that we do Nowadays, right, you have a washing cup and you go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You put water on your hands, you utter a prayer, right, a short blessing. This is something that Jews have done since the destruction, or even at the destruction of at the time of the Second Temple, or maybe even before some of them. Anyway, I'm getting off track. What I want to say is that Israel were always considered holier, not in an egocentric way, egotistical way, just in a way that they are separated. We have different customs. I mean, back in the scroll of Esther, in that time in Persia, Haman told the king, "There's a people who are separated from all the other nations, and they go their own way, and they don't do what you command. They sort of follow their own path." And he saw that as basis for extermination. But his point still stands. The people of Israel, even in exile, had certain customs and traditions that they kept, which segregated them. Things having to do with food, things having to do with what the people of Israel are allowed to wear and what not, things having to do with keeping the Sabbath day and the different festivals during the year. These are all things which serve to sanctify the individual, the community, the nation, the land, the people. And after it becomes larger than the people of Israel, then we go out, to humankind, mankind, and all creation as a result of that. But right now, in this time, Israel are unique in that sense. And even it's not something that we have. This idea that Israel is holy is something that is constantly earned, constantly sought, constantly studied, and different practices followed. Because this isn't something that we get to wear like a badge of honor, No, this is something that we need to earn, sometimes with blood, unfortunately, this uniqueness of Israel. So here, I'm just going to read through a few. So in this week's Torah portion, we have fearing your mother and your father, keeping the Sabbath, not for the first time, for different reasons. The prohibition on worshiping false idols and false gods, right? The foreign gods. Eating the peace offering is only allowed 2 days after it was offered. During harvest, you must leave certain parts of the field where you don't collect what you harvest, and you leave it for the poor, for the orphans, for the widows, and for the converts, or the people living there who are not of the people of Israel, but who do live there, and they have a specific and special status in the Torah, and I won't get into it now. Do not steal. Big one. And love thy neighbor as you do yourself. That's in this Torah portion. And of that, Rabbi Akiva, at the time of the Second Temple, and I mentioned Rabbi Akiva, and maybe I'll put a card for him as well. Rabbi Akiva said, "Love thy neighbor as you do yourself is a great law, a great pillar of the Torah." He or others, and himself to he goes on to say, or whoever brought it, if we treat each other right, and I mean from a place of righteousness and from a place of truth, and not from a place of political correctness or fear or a naivete, right, of being naive and gullible or ignorant. I mean from a place where you treat each other right because it's the right thing to do and you know how to go about it because it's something that occupies your time, really giving it the proper mindset of how do we treat each other. Love thy neighbor as you do yourself. When we learn to treat each other properly, and you could argue that that isn't even 100% in the Torah, and that the Torah also says there are times when you mistreat someone. There is that. Religion and the segregation which religion causes has it. The fact that Israel are segregated and separated with their tribes and their customs and traditions is also sometimes to their detriment. Nevertheless, globally, and in a kind of very pervading and transcendent nature, the idea of treating each other right and of doing good for other people and doing kindness towards others take precedence over the commandments between you and your God, something like that. That's where there's just more there. There were times when the prophets were saying that God wants us to treat each other right and to act with kindness and humility. And as far as he's concerned, you don't need to sacrifice, you don't need to slaughter animals, you don't need to do anything special other than be kind and good to one another. It's, in a way, it's simplistic, but it is that simple. And that's what this verse, right? Love thy neighbor as you do yourself, which is followed by I am the Lord your God, or I am the Lord, Ani Adonai. Why is it that when we are talking about loving your fellow man, why then does the Torah say I am God, I am the Lord? I think that that's something that could easily be sort of trampled over, in the great haste to do the word of God and have a good relationship with God and go, on the straight and narrow and fulfill the commandments as taught in the, in the traditions and customs of the written and oral Torah, or whatever it is, because this part applies to every religion. If you are too eager to please God and you fulfill those commandments but forget about your fellow man, there is something lacking in the way that you view your relationship with God. I think that for most people, it's not an absolute, but for most people, being kind to their fellow man and being gracious towards their fellow man and being able to tell off their fellow man should they see something, if they really are there for their fellow man, for their friends, their wives and husbands, their children, their relatives, the family, the community, the country, the whole thing. It's a spectrum. I think that if people immerse themselves in being kinder because they want to be and because they perceive an opportunity and take advantage of it and aren't being selfish and arrogant and just full of harm or hate or choosing the right thing to do, righteousness, it opens up a lot of doors. And this goes on beyond humans, right? It's the animals and it's nature and it's all creation. But you start with the people you know. You know how they say you hurt the ones you love? This is something I've said many times because I hurt the ones I love. And so I know what that's about. And you also heal the ones you love and you love the ones you love. It goes both ways. Hang on. Did I just lose it? No, I didn't lose it. Yeah, we're still recording? Yeah. So the Torah portion, Kedoshim, is a lot of different laws. And I urge you to open it up. What is it? It's let's see, it's na, 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 na. Okay, well, it's the end of it's towards the end of the book of Numbers, if I'm not mistaken. Numbers. I sometimes I confuse Numbers with Deuteronomy or something like that. There's a lot here. No, it's not Numbers. We're still in Exodus. My mistake. We're still in Exodus. So in this Torah portion, there's a lot. But the bottom line of this whole thing, and all the time that I was talking now, and I don't have the time in front of me, I'm sure it was a long time, but if you lasted so far, kudos, I appreciate it. And the bottom line is, make yourself sacred and separated and holy by incorporating or by discovering pillars of righteousness and truth that you can follow, and just having the capacity and the will, the desire to go for it and acquiring the tools to better yourself and advance yourself in that path, on that journey. And if you do that, every little thing that you do has an effect that's larger than what you may be able to perceive. Much like there are different rays and waves and signals in the air right now at this very moment, but we can't see them without the proper tools, there's a lot of good karma, cosmic energy, good vibration, divine emanations in this world right now. If you open yourself up by acting in righteousness and being separated and holy the way that you want to be, if you do that, you will be able to open up a lot more than you, let's say, would bargain for. If you, for instance, say, I want to expand my mind, I want to be a better person, I want to be a better religious or spiritual individual, whatever the reason is for you to decide to be more kind towards others and to make an attempt to better yourself and segregate yourself in some ways and separate yourself in some ways, even from the tiniest and smallest of things, right? You don't have to think so outside the box for this. Start with what you know. If you go on that path and you decide to do that and to devote yourself to that, even if it's from the tiniest step, amazing things can come at you. Very good things can come at you. Because when you do a small, tiny fraction of a thing in this physical, material burden of a world, in the spiritual realms and in the higher planes of consciousness or existence of the spirit, it's not just a tiny little move, it's a whole voyage. That's one good way to think about it, that Rabbi Nachman of Breslev really solidified in my mind. He even has a... Never mind, let's not get into that. Let's have a wonderful Sabbath, a wonderful, wonderful weekend of bliss, of relaxation, of learning and bettering and improving ourselves. I pray to the Most High that He will be able to give me the opportunities to separate myself and to segregate myself and to be sacred and be holy by being a righteous man. And I say this to myself as much as I'd like to say it to each and every one of you who may be watching this, if you made it this far. Thank you. I really appreciate your sub. I appreciate your viewing. And that's it. Let's have a wonderful Sabbath. God bless.